It all started on a quiet evening, the kind where everything feels normal, almost too normal. I had no idea that night would mark the beginning of the unraveling of my family's trust. Our family dinners were always filled with laughter, a sense of togetherness that I thought was unbreakable. But underneath the smiles and conversations, there were cracks I hadn't noticed. Cracks that were about to split wide open. The affair wasn't just a secret, it was a ticking time bomb. It didn't happen overnight, and maybe that's why it was so devastating. The betrayal seeped into our lives like a shadow, growing darker and larger with every passing day. At first, it was just a suspicion, an odd phone call, or a sudden change in behavior. I ignored the signs, convincing myself that everything was fine. But deep down, I knew something was wrong. And then, one evening, everything changed. A single moment, a simple discovery, was all it took to shatter the fragile balance we had unknowingly been clinging to. The confrontation that followed wasn't just explosive, it was heartbreaking. The people I trusted most, the foundation of my life, suddenly seemed like strangers. I'll never forget the look in my family's eyes when the truth came out. It wasn't just disappointment, it was hurt, anger, and confusion all at once. The aftermath was something I wouldn't wish on anyone. Trust is easy to take for granted until it's gone. But how did it all begin? And what led to this devastating betrayal? The answers are both shocking and painfully real, and they hold the key to understanding the choices that destroyed everything we once held dear. Stay with me as I take you through the moments that changed my life forever. The cracks in our family didn't appear out of nowhere. They were the result of years of small, unnoticed actions and unspoken feelings. At first, everything seemed perfect. We were the family everyone looked up to, always smiling, always together. But the truth was far more complicated. Beneath the surface, there were frustrations and disappointments that none of us had the courage to confront. It wasn't that we didn't care, it was that we didn't know how to bridge the growing gaps between us. It all started with subtle changes. There were late nights spent on the phone, hushed conversations that ended abruptly when someone entered the room, and an increasing sense of distance. At first, I thought it was work stress or something equally mundane. But then, the excuses started piling up. Missed dinners, forgotten commitments, and an air of secrecy that hung heavy in the house. It was like trying to hold on to sand as it slipped through my fingers, no matter how tightly I tried to grasp it. There was one evening in particular that still haunts me. I walked into the kitchen to find my partner staring at their phone, a guilty look flashing across their face as they quickly put it away. "Who was that?" I asked casually, but my heart was pounding. The answer was vague, dismissive. I wanted to believe it, but something in their tone told me there was more to the story. That was the moment I felt the first real pang of doubt, and it only grew stronger as the days went by. The kids, too, seemed to sense the tension. They asked fewer questions, their laughter quieter than usual. It was as if they were tiptoeing around a truth none of us wanted to face. The atmosphere in our home shifted, and the warmth that once defined us felt like a distant memory. I began to wonder, was it me? Was I not enough? The doubt crept in, whispering thoughts I didn't want to acknowledge. I started looking for answers, piecing together fragments of conversations, glances, and moments that didn't quite add up. What I discovered would forever change the way I saw my family and myself. But at that point, I still clung to the hope that whatever was happening, we could fix it. Little did I know, the storm brewing was about to sweep everything away. The unease continued to grow, feeding on the silences and half-truths that now filled our home. I began to notice patterns that I couldn't ignore. Nights where my partner claimed to be working late, but their phone battery was mysteriously drained when I tried to call. Their smile, once so warm and reassuring, felt guarded, like they were holding back a part of themselves I was no longer invited to see. It was a small thing, but it added weight to the gnawing feeling in my chest that something was terribly wrong. Meanwhile, the kids were acting out in subtle ways. Our eldest, usually calm and collected, had started to come home with a quiet anger simmering just beneath the surface. Their room became a fortress, the door almost always shut. I knew something was bothering them, but when I asked, they'd only shrug and mutter, "It's nothing." Our youngest, on the other hand, had grown overly clingy, constantly seeking reassurance that everything was okay. Their innocent questions, "Why does Dad seem so tired?" Or, "Why don't we have dinner together anymore?" pierced straight through my heart. One evening, as I was folding laundry, I found something that confirmed my worst fears. A receipt for an expensive dinner at a restaurant we'd never been to. The date on it lined up with one of those so-called late nights at work. My stomach dropped. I didn't confront my partner immediately, but the walls felt like they were closing in. I spent the next few days watching every move they made, every word they said, searching for clues. It was exhausting and heartbreaking, but I couldn't stop. Amid all this, I confided in my best friend, hoping they could offer clarity or advice. Instead, they hesitated, their expression clouded with something that looked like guilt. "There's something you should know," they said, their voice barely above a whisper. My heart raced as they began to speak, unraveling a piece of the puzzle that I wasn't ready to hear. It wasn't just one betrayal I was dealing with. The threads of deception ran deeper than I'd imagined. And yet, I couldn't bring myself to confront it outright. I wasn't just afraid of losing my partner. I was terrified of what this truth would do to our family. The weight of it all hung over me like a dark cloud, and I knew that sooner or later the storm would break. The days that followed felt like walking on a tightrope, with every step bringing me closer to a truth I wasn't ready to face. My partner's behavior grew more erratic. They avoided eye contact, their conversations clipped and filled with excuses. They spent more time away from home, leaving me to piece together their absence with flimsy justifications that only deepened my suspicions. It wasn't just the late nights anymore, it was the subtle shifts in how they interacted with me and the children. The warmth that once defined our family dynamic seemed to have been replaced with a cold, unspoken tension. Meanwhile, I couldn't shake the unsettling feeling that my best friend knew more than they were letting on. Their cryptic words replayed in my mind, their hesitation haunting me. I tried pressing for details, but they avoided my calls and gave vague responses when we did speak. It was as if they were trying to protect me from something too painful to articulate, but their avoidance only added to my torment. I was trapped in a cycle of second-guessing every relationship in my life. One evening, as I was tucking our youngest into bed, they looked up at me with wide, innocent eyes and asked, "Mom, are you mad at Dad? You don't smile like you used to." Their words broke me in a way I hadn't anticipated. I realized that no matter how hard I tried to shield them from my turmoil, the cracks in our family were becoming impossible to hide. Desperate for answers, I decided to check my partner's phone, a line I never thought I'd cross. My hands trembled as I scrolled through their messages, my heart pounding with each notification I read. And then I found it, a string of texts that confirmed my worst fears. The evidence was undeniable. The messages were affectionate, intimate, and utterly devastating. But just as I was about to confront them, my eldest walked into the room, their face pale and filled with a mix of anger and pain. "Mom," they began, their voice trembling, "there's something I need to tell you. I saw something you need to know." My breath caught as they hesitated, their words holding the weight of another revelation I wasn't prepared for. It felt like the ground beneath me was crumbling, and I was bracing for the final blow. My eldest stood frozen in the doorway, their face a mixture of fear and determination. I could see the battle raging within them as they decided whether to speak. My heart raced, and the air between us felt heavy, as though it carried the weight of their unspoken words. "What is it?" I managed to whisper, though my voice barely felt like my own. They stepped closer, clutching their phone tightly. "I didn't mean to see it, Mom," they began, their voice trembling. "But last week, I borrowed Dad's tablet to do homework, and I found pictures that weren't of you." My stomach sank, and for a moment, the world seemed to tilt. The confirmation I feared was now staring me in the face, not from messages or hints, but from the eyes of my own child. As they hesitated, I reached out to comfort them, though I felt completely unraveled myself. It's okay, I said softly, though nothing about this moment was okay. You can tell me. They handed me their phone, and I saw the images they had taken of the evidence, a tangled mess of snapshots and texts, fragments of a life I had no idea my partner was leading. What shattered me most was the betrayal my child must have felt, the burden they carried, not knowing how to share it with me until now. But just as the pieces of this devastation began to fall into place, my child's voice cracked again. There's more, they said, glancing toward the living room. I overheard something. Dad was on the phone talking about money and about leaving. The word leaving echoed in my mind, bouncing around until it became unbearable. The thought of my partner planning an escape, abandoning not just me but our children, was a level of betrayal I couldn't comprehend. At that moment, I heard the unmistakable sound of the front door creaking open. My partner had come home, and I wasn't ready for what would happen next. My eldest's eyes widened in panic, and I quickly slipped their phone into my pocket. I whispered, "Not a word for now," as my partner's footsteps grew louder, approaching the room. They entered, smiling in a way that felt forced, their eyes scanning the room for any sign that the truth had been unearthed. My heart raced as I wondered how much they knew, how aware they were of the storm brewing just beneath the surface. The tension was suffocating, and every word they spoke felt like a calculated move to gauge where I stood. As I tried to maintain a semblance of normalcy, the weight of the second revelation pressed down on me. The betrayal wasn't just an affair, it was an escape plan. And now, with my child knowing and my partner unaware of what I had discovered, the stakes had never been higher. Every glance, every word felt like a game of chess, with our family hanging in the balance. The air felt thick with tension as my partner entered the room. They glanced around, their eyes lingering on me longer than usual, as if sensing that something was off. I swallowed the lump in my throat and tried to keep my face neutral, though my hands trembled slightly. My eldest sat silently, their gaze fixed on the floor, visibly uncomfortable. "I thought I'd grab dinner on the way home," my partner said, holding up a takeout bag with an almost too casual smile. I nodded, forcing a small smile in return, though my mind raced with how to confront everything I had just learned. Should I wait? Should I pretend I didn't know? But every moment felt heavier with the weight of the truth. I couldn't let this fester any longer. When the kids left the room to set the table, I took a deep breath and finally spoke. "We need to talk," I said, my voice steady but firm. My partner froze mid-step, their back to me. Slowly, they turned around, their expression shifting into something guarded. "About what?" they asked, but their voice betrayed a flicker of unease. I pulled out my phone and placed it on the table between us. "About this," I said, my voice sharper now. The color drained from their face as they saw the images, the messages, the evidence. For a moment the room was silent except for the sound of my heart pounding in my ears. "You weren't even going to tell me, were you?" I asked, my voice cracking under the weight of my emotions. "You were just going to leave. Leave us." Their eyes darted between me and the phone, panic setting in. "It's not what it looks like," they stammered, but I cut them off. "Don't lie to me," I said, my voice rising. "I deserve the truth. The kids deserve the truth." And just when I thought I couldn't take any more, my eldest re-entered the room, standing tall. "I told her everything," they said, looking directly at their father. The unexpected boldness in their voice sent a shockwave through the room. My partner's shoulders slumped, and they looked defeated. "I never wanted it to come to this," they muttered, as if that excused the damage. But the twist came when my youngest, who had been eavesdropping from the hallway, stepped forward with tears in their eyes. "I knew, too," they whispered. "I just didn't know how to say it." It hit me like a tidal wave that the betrayal wasn't just mine to bear. It had rippled through my entire family. The damage was deeper than I had imagined, but as we all stood there, raw and exposed, I realized something. This was our breaking point, but it could also be our beginning. The room fell into an uneasy silence, each of us trying to process the gravity of what had just unfolded. My youngest wiped their tears, their small frame trembling with emotions far too big for them to carry. I knelt down, pulling both children into a tight embrace, as if trying to shield them from the emotional storm. "We'll get through this," I whispered, though my voice carried a mix of conviction and uncertainty. My partner sat down heavily on the couch, head in hands, the weight of their actions pressing down like a boulder. "I never wanted to hurt any of you," they said, their voice hollow. I looked at them, searching for a glimmer of sincerity. "But you did," I replied quietly, "and now we have to figure out how to pick up the pieces." The night turned into one of raw honesty. My partner admitted their mistakes, laying bare the struggles they had been too afraid to confront. While the pain of betrayal lingered, hearing them own up to their actions brought a sliver of clarity. We talked as a family, the children expressing their confusion and hurt, their voices small but brave. It was messy, uncomfortable, and riddled with tears, but it was also necessary. In the days that followed, I made the difficult decision to prioritize healing over trying to salvage what was broken. My partner agreed to move out temporarily, giving us the space to rebuild trust and regain some sense of stability. The kids and I leaned on each other, creating new routines and finding strength in our bond. Slowly, the weight of that night began to lift. While forgiveness didn't come easily, it began to sprout in the cracks left by our pain. I learned that healing is not about erasing what happened, but about finding a way to move forward. The affair may have shattered the trust in our family, but it also forced us to confront truths we had long ignored. And in that confrontation, there was growth. Looking back, the hardest part wasn't the betrayal itself, but realizing how deeply it affected all of us. But we survived. Together, we began to create a new version of our family, imperfect, yet resilient. The secret may have shaken us to our core, but it also taught us the value of honesty, communication, and the unyielding power of love.